Welcome back. Learn with Love Mondays. Thanks so much for having patience as I took some time off. Hopefully you guys followed my adventures through Zion last week. We had a blast and I am super excited to be back in office and really kind of pick up where we left off, especially rounding out our month of April, talking all things gut health. Gut health has been one of the most common signs and symptoms and topics that comes up in a lot of my client and patient conversations because so many individuals are out there struggling, and it just really breaks my heart because I know that personally I can empathize with that, having been through a significant gut health journey myself in the past, and healing myself through that process and sharing all of that knowledge now professionally and how much it really impacts people's quality of life. So I know that I made a recent Instagram post about that as well too, really just discussing and talking about not just the physical signs and symptoms of gut health, but how the gut health can really even extend into impacting someone's quality of life, and showing how individuals that struggle with gut health issues, it impacts eating in social scenarios, impacts relationship with food, anxiety around food. I've heard even as far as individuals saying that they don't travel anywhere without knowing where the bathrooms are at, individuals that don't travel without a very specific like supplement and medication regimen that they feel like if they miss one day of it, they're going to be thrown all off. And it just breaks my heart to see individuals really plan and adjust their life around their gut health symptoms. And that is not normal. And so I really want to make sure that we have a conversation around making this a forefront topic, right? It's not necessarily taboo or embarrassing to talk about gut health or bathroom-based issues, and also making sure that we leave a conversation for talking about how gut health manifests itself in different ways than even just our digestive health. A lot of people come to me even with skin issues that greatly impact their quality of life. It impacts what clothes they'll wear or what they'll buy, or all these different things of like acne and psoriasis and eczema, even things like acid reflux and thyroid disease and autoimmune disease. All of these things relate back to the gut. So we can't talk about overall metabolic health, hormonal health. We can't talk about positive body image or relationship with food without really talking and discussing gut health. So that's really what April has been all about, is making sure that we have lots of different opportunities to have conversations around different topics that pertain to gut health, from food sensitivities to us really even talking about things like IBS. Today we're going to really dive into this irritable bowel syndrome because I hear this diagnosis come across my patient forums quite frequently, and you'll learn why I'm using air quotes around the term diagnosis. It's not an accidental thing, it's kind of a purposeful thing. Not to, not to take less light of it. It's a very serious, and like I said, impacting people's quality of life, but it's an incomplete way of describing or giving these individuals information about why they're feeling the way that they are. So we just want to make sure that, like I said, I don't want individuals feeling like they don't have anywhere to turn when their symptoms are dismissed by primary care providers or gastroenterologists who just tell them, oh, well, your symptoms are normal or your labs are normal. And meanwhile, you're struggling and suffering because they've kind of checked some of the big scary things off of the list, which is great, but we are now left with symptoms that are greatly impacting our quality of life. So one of the most common diagnoses in the gastrointestinal space, the number one gastrointestinal diagnosis in that space actually, is irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. There's different types of IBS. You can have IBS, IBS-C, which is IBS with constipation. But really, when we're thinking about what is IBS, IBS stands for irritable bowel syndrome. And whenever we have a syndrome is really just a collection or a cluster of symptoms with an unknown etiology or an unknown cause. So we're lumping all of these people together essentially that have said, hey, I have things like abdominal pain, I have cramping, I have alternating bowel movement patterns from constipation to diarrhea, I have gas, I have bloating, I have multiple food sensitivities, I have extreme fatigue. These types of things, when we run these individuals through the ringer of different lab tests or colonoscopies, endoscopies to really kind of rule out some of the big stuff, IBS is what we're left with as a diagnosis of exclusion. Meaning we have checked all the big scary things off the list. You don't have this, you don't have that, and you don't have this. So you just have IBS, and here is your prescription and you're on your way. So most of the time a traditional medicine's treatment strategy around something like an IBS will be anti-diarrheal drugs, even laxatives, things like antidepressants are commonly used, antispasmodics are commonly used, recommendations around more or less fiber intake is commonly used. And while those are definitely useful strategies for Band-Aid solutions on our symptoms, they are just that. They're really a Band-Aid solution. They're not necessarily bringing the conversation of why. Why do I have these symptoms? What is the underlying disease pattern that is still progressing, even if I do take these antispasmodics and these anti-diarrheal? What I really want people to understand is, while those are managing your symptoms, which are absolutely necessary to improve your quality of life, we want to be using those treatment strategies while we dig into the root cause. Because if we don't get into the root cause, then the IBS is really just one symptom that our body is trying to communicate with us on a daily basis that like things are not okay. Things do not feel great down here. And if we don't take care of these symptoms now, if we just try to kind of shut the symptoms up every day, the disease progression is still happening underneath the surface. So sure, right now you might be diagnosed with something like an IBS, but that IBS has the potential to grow into bigger and more serious type of labels, right? I see people that have IBS, but they also have endometriosis. I have people that have IBS and then they also end up developing polyps, or they have IBS and then they develop autoimmune disease. It's like these things are still progressing under the surface because they never really dealt with or were educated about what's the root cause. So that's really where my passion point lies, is let's bring the why back into medicine. Let's bring the why back into some of these conversations so that we have a much, much better understanding long-term and short-term treatment strategy around how we're going to tackle symptoms or diagnoses like an IBS. And it's not something that ruins this person's quality of life forever or leaves them with bigger, scarier future diagnoses down the road that they were never even told were connected to the IBS all along, right? So everything fits together. We are not just a bunch of random systems and organs and glands in our body. We are one unit, and what happens in one part of the body is definitely being known and compensated for in other parts of the body. So we have to really take these symptoms seriously and understand that the body is trying desperately to communicate with us. And when we just come in hot with Band-Aid solutions, it doesn't give the body an opportunity to really express itself. And we kind of just continuously tell it to shut up, shut up, shut up, right? And eventually it's probably going to make its intentions known, whether we like it or not. So when we think about, again, IBS, I think about individuals, again, abdominal pain, cramping, bloating, alternating bowel patterns, having to rush to the bathroom after meals, or being chronically constipated. And constipated is defined as less than one bowel movement a day. So if you do not take a bowel movement every single day, that is the definition of constipated. So just want to be clear there, because some people are like, oh yeah, I go like maybe once or twice a week and that's normal for me. I'm like, Yeah, but that's not normal. That's still defined as constipation, and that's still a symptom that we really want to kind of dig into. So some people have both. They'll have bouts of diarrhea and then days of constipation, classic IBS symptom. A lot of bloating or distension, abdominal distension, and a lot of times they connect this or attempt to connect this to food sensitivities. Because again, that's where more of the functional medicine has forced us to think. It's like, oh, if you're having bloating, then you need to cut out this and cut out that and cut out this. And it's not the food. It's the terrain of our gut not being able to tolerate those foods. So again, just kind of building off of our food sensitivity conversation, why? Why is my gut not tolerating these foods? It can't just be that don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat this, don't eat that. And now our diet shrinks to the same 5 foods on repeat, which is the opposite of gut health, being of a terrain of diversity, which is what we want to build. So it's a really, really slippery slope with my IBS folks of getting them out of that same 5 safe foods on repeat, getting them out of that, like, where is the bathroom situation? How do I get confidence to be able to manage my symptoms, reverse my symptoms truly by looking at the potential root causes. So IBS is just a cluster of symptoms, so that's why I kind of call it an incomplete diagnosis. It's more one of those, again, we've checked off the big scary stuff off the list, but you're just left with this blanket label of you have IBS. Go about your life, right? Managing the symptoms. I think there's so much more to the equation than that. There's so much more to life than just managing our symptoms or shutting up our symptoms on a daily basis. So if you have been struggling with IBS or you have a lot of those symptoms that I described of IBS, just never really been told you have it, there's a good enough reason there to really ask why. What are some of the main root causes, the actual root causes of IBS? So we want to really make sure that we understand, just like we talked about with digestion, it works in a north to south approach. So if we have lower gut dysfunction, we need to be looking what's happening above it, right? So we need to be looking at the impact of the brain, or things like stress, perceived or unperceived stress. This could also be HPA axis or cortisol dysregulation. This could also be thyroid imbalances can really manifest or impact the gut and the gut motility itself. Maybe we're struggling with poor food hygiene. We're eating in a stress state. We're very anxious about food. So even before we eat a food, we're already anticipating that it's going to cause a problem. That is part of that brain encephalic response. So maybe we have poor food hygiene, a poor relationship with food. Maybe we have low stomach acid. Maybe we have bacterial dysbiosis in the small or large intestine. Maybe we have some malabsorption or some gallbladder or bile production problems going on. Maybe there's an undiagnosed celiac or autoimmune disease happening, or even something that we call SIBO, like a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right? So when we think about an IBS picture, it's not just, oh, IBS, here's your label, you're on your way, manage your symptoms for the rest of your life with these series of different prescription medications, and you're just going to kick the can down the road and wait for something bigger to occur. No, we're going to dig in and be like, okay, I got this IBS diagnosis. Why? Why do I have this? And how can I really come to the table and reverse it? We're going to need to do some additional testing. It just is what it is. We need to figure out what is your why, because everybody is different. Not everybody that has IBS has the exact same root cause. So I would encourage, again, anybody that has a lot of these symptoms and they're kind of looking to dig into the root cause, please get and ask for a full thyroid panel. When I say full thyroid panel, I mean full thyroid panel. You're not going to see anything just from a free T4 or a TSH. We need a TSH, we need a free T4, we need a free T3. Bonus if we can add on things like reverse T3 to really see how our body is putting the brakes on the thyroid, and bonus if we can really get some TPO antibodies in there to rule out things like autoimmune influences or Hashimoto's. So absolutely. Yes, I know I'm talking about the gut and I'm asking you to get a full thyroid panel. Yes, fully aware. That's intentional, right? Also, I would look at, again, getting things like a detailed look at our cortisol or our HPA axis. You can utilize things like non-invasive measurements like heart rate variability or HRV can be a really good metric to look at overall cortisol and HPA axis regulation over a longer course of time. More of a quick snapshot would be doing like a dried urine or a dried saliva 12-hour cortisol test, which we call kind of a diurnal cortisol pattern, and that will show, are we spilling a ton of cortisol, or are our adrenals tired and fatigued out? So getting a good cortisol picture, I think, can be extremely helpful. I would even get some micronutrient look, right? We can look at things like stomach acid, inflammation markers, vitamin mineral status, especially how are you absorbing things like B12, fat soluble vitamins like vitamin D. You can run things like serum gastrin. All of these types of things will really give us a pretty good indicator of overall the overall terrain in the upper part of the gut, to be able to make sure that we're favorably promoting lower gut function as well too. So lots of different things that we can dive into from a testing standpoint to really look at what is your specific root cause, because then that's going to guide us towards our more specific treatment strategy for that particular IBS situation. So once you kind of identify what your root cause is, then you can start focusing on fixing it. So obviously, I am not your practitioner. So this is not health information. This is health education here. So I won't be able to tell you exactly how to reverse it, because obviously I don't know your particular cause. But I will say that the three most common areas that we're going to really be digging into here to really revive or reverse this IBS conversation, we're going to be thinking the priorities of treatment is going to be number one, lowering inflammation. I know it sounds super buzzword when we think about inflammation, but that's what's really happening in the gut. We likely have some leaky gut going on or some intestinal permeability. We need to really be looking at the diet as one of the biggest sources of inflammation, either a source of inflammation or a cure of inflammation. So we want to be focusing on a whole food anti-inflammatory diet. We do want to be mindful of things like fiber, because depending on your potential root cause, some people with IBS do better with more fiber and some people do worse with more fiber. But regardless, it's one of those things where if you can't tolerate fiber, it's not one of those where it's like, oh, well, then I just don't eat fiber for the rest of my life. It's like, no, we need to figure out why and fix the gut terrain so that you tolerate fiber. You should not be on a restrictive IBS diet forever. That is like number one, do not do. I would say the most common diet associated with IBS would be like the FODMAP diet, where you're going to be excluding a lot of things, a lot of healthful foods, specifically certain fruits and vegetables. Again, going after the certain sources of fiber, eliminating certain types of grains. So the FODMAP approach, while I get what they're doing by helping people reduce their fiber intake to control symptoms, it is not a forever solution. And in fact, it should be one that's used as very much like a therapeutic tool for a couple of weeks to lower inflammation. And then there should be a reintroduction phase so that this individual is able to tolerate more foods. Right? So definitely lowering inflammation through nutrition strategies, managing stress, being mindful of fiber diversity, that's going to be number one. Any ways that we can really lower inflammation. Most of that, like I said, is going to come through nutritional intervention. Some of that can also be supported through supplementation strategies as well too. Number two is going to be nervous system regulation. And when I say nervous system regulation, yes, I'm talking about the gut to brain axis. We have to respect and give a very strong nod to the fact that our brain controls our gut, which is why we hear all the time, it's like, ooh, I get a knot in my stomach when I get nervous, or I get butterflies in my stomach, or I get the nervous poops. That is not ironic. That is 100% you are experiencing that gut to brain axis. And a lot of individuals with IBS tend to have a tough time controlling cortisol, controlling stress, managing their stress response. So this is where first I would look at things like circadian rhythm, like our sleep patterns, when we're eating, how we're eating, light exposure through the day, mindset, meditation, breath work, things like acupuncture. There's actually a really good app. It's called the Nerva app, Nerva. And the Nerva app actually walks you through a lot of breath work designed specifically for IBS patients. So fun fact there for you. So number 1 being lowering inflammation, number 2 being nervous system regulation, and then number 3 category of treatment strategies is going to be managing motility. And that's going to be addressing gallbladder function. A lot of times poor gallbladder function or poor bile production can exacerbate a lot of those like urgent bathroom trips. So I want to be really looking at, okay, is this person's root cause of IBS something to do with the gallbladder or bile production? How do we want to be supporting the liver and stomach acid and gallbladder there? Improving food hygiene, eating seated, chewing your food more thoroughly, taking in deep nasal breaths before we eat to engage the cephalic response of food, get that brain to gut connection working. Maybe it's things that we're doing to enhance blood flow to the gut. That could be some intentional cold exposure, could be some abdominal massage, some lymphatic massage, could even be utilizing some different supplement strategies for constipation as well too. So all in all, we have to first understand that IBS is an incomplete diagnosis. It's a cluster of symptoms that's based off of a diagnosis of exclusion. We've ruled out the big scary stuff. So here you have this cluster of symptoms, and a lot of other people do too. So we're just going to call it IBS and just manage your symptoms. Meanwhile, we know that IBS is really just the first pit stop to bigger issues going on. So if we don't address the root cause through some testing and looking at things like, what's the brain to gut connection? What's my cortisol and my adrenals doing? What is my thyroid doing? What's my gallbladder, stomach acid, all of that doing? Then we're never going to be able to really get to the treatment strategies around lowering inflammation, managing motility, or supporting our nervous system regulation. So all in all, I hope that, like I said, that gives you a little bit of kind of a big picture zoomed out strategy of really bringing that question of why back into the conversation versus just accepting that I have this label, this diagnosis, and it's slapped on me and I'm going to go on my merry way, just managing my symptoms and just waiting for something bigger to happen. I'm not all about that. I think that it's, again, listening to the body and really understanding what it's trying to communicate with us and meeting it where it's at right here, right now, before it does get to something big and scary. And it's like, ooh, I probably should have listened to my body when it was giving me these IBS-based symptoms and I didn't do anything about it. I just went on my merry way, managing symptoms and greatly impacting my quality of life until it became something worse down the road. So if, like I said, you struggle with IBS type symptoms or you know somebody that does, please share this with them, forward it. I'm all about education. That's where my passion and my heart is at. I want everybody to feel empowered around their own health and their own health journey and what they can proactively be doing to manage that more effectively. So like and share with friends if anybody in your life you know could benefit from this information. So we'll roll into a little bit more of some gut health stuff as we roll into a new month of May. We're going to be really talking next week about autoimmunity. I know I've been plugging this a little bit in that big umbrella term of autoimmunity, which should open up some really cool conversations and areas for us as well. So enjoy the rest of your Monday and the rest of your week, and we will see you then.